officiated at sacrifices for a few others who performed duties on behalf of a village, and some who even made voyages across the Aegean. All these were considered chandalas among Brahmanas, but Bhishma also spoke of those who rose to positions of power at Ritvikas, Puratas, counselors, envoys, and messengers. They became equal to Kshatriyas. Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he grasped the nuances of Bhishma's words. He knew that a king's treasury was not limitless, but he also understood that certain Brahmanas deserved special treatment. Grandsire, he asked, how should I handle those who have fallen away from their legitimate duties? Bhishma's expression turned stern as he replied, a king must. In the midst of a tranquil forest king, Yudhishthira sat in deep contemplation, seeking guidance from the wise Bhishma. The king's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he asked, Grandsire, whose wealth is the king considered to be the Lord, and what conduct should the king adopt? Bhishma, with his piercing gaze and gentle tone, replied, the Vedas proclaim that the king is the master of all wealth except that which belongs to the Brahmanas who observe their duties. The righteous say that a king must not spare those Brahmanas who neglect their responsibilities. As Bhishma spoke, a tale unfolded in his words. He told of the king of the Kekyas, a just and virtuous ruler who lived in harmony with nature and revered the sacred order of the Brahmanas. One day, while dwelling in the woods, he was forcibly taken by a Rakshasa. The king's words to this fearsome creature are etched in memory. There is no thief in my territories, nor any person of wicked behavior. How then hast thou been able to possess my heart? The king's monologue continued as he enumerated his kingdom's virtues. He spoke of the Brahmanas who taught, studied, and performed sacrifices with devotion, the Kshatriyas who protected and honored them, the Vaisyas who cultivated the land, raised cattle, and traded with integrity, and the Sudras who humbly served the other three orders without malice. The king's voice echoed through the forest as he proclaimed his support for the helpless, the old, and women in need. But amidst this tapestry of virtue, a mysterious Rakshasa appeared. Its presence as enigmatic as the wind, since you are observant of duties under all circumstances. It said to the king of the Kekyas, go back to your abode, blessed be though I leave thee. The Rakshasa's words were laced with a deep understanding. Those who protect kine and Brahmanas have nothing to fear from its kind. Bhishma continued his tale, speaking of the sacred bond between kings and Brahmanas. Protect the Brahmanas, he advised Yudhishthira, and they will protect you. In return, their blessings would surely descend upon kings of righteous behavior. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the forest, Bhishma's words hung in the air like a promise. For the sake of righteousness, those Brahmanas who neglect their duties should be chastised and separated from their superiors. A king who conducts himself thus towards his people would obtain prosperity here and residence in heaven with Indra.
In the midst of great turmoil and distress, Yudhishthira, the righteous king, sought the counsel of Bhishma, the venerable warrior Brahmanas. He asked may support themselves by practicing Kshatriya duties in times of need. But can they ever sustain themselves by following the occupations of Vaisyas? Bhishma, with his wise and gentle demeanor, replied, when a Brahmana falls into distress and loses his means of support, he may indeed take up the practices of a Vaisya, agriculture and cattle keeping. If he is incapable of performing Kshatriya duties, Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued. If a Brahmana takes on the duties of a Vaisya, he asked, what articles may he sell without losing his prospect of heaven? Bhishma's eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began to explain a Brahmana must avoid selling certain items. He said wine, salt, sesame, seeds, animals having manes, bulls, honey, meat, and cooked food. By selling these, a Brahmana would sink into hell. Yudhishthira's brow furrowed in concern. Bhishma continued, but there is an exception. If one gives uncooked food for cooked food in exchange, he is permissibly. Yudhishthira pressed on with his questions. When all the orders, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras, give up their respective duties and take up arms against the king, then the power of the king decreases. Bhishma nodded in understanding. In such times, he said, all the orders should seek their own good through gifts, penances, sacrifices, peacefulness, and self-restraint. Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture of how the social order was meant to function when the king, crowned with victory, seeks the re-establishment of peace. He said, all the orders then betake themselves to their respective duties. But what if all the Kshatriyas became hostile towards the Brahmanas, who would protect them and their sacred. Vedas Vishnu's response was as calm as a summer breeze. The Kshatriyas should be subjugated by penances, brahmacharya, weapons, or physical might, applied with or without deceit. He explained that even the Vedas themselves could subdue the Kshatriyas if they misconducted themselves towards Brahmanas. Yudhishthira's questions continued to flow like a river if robbers raise their heads and there is an intermixture of the orders, and Kshatriyas become incompetent. What then? Bhishma's eyes shone with compassion as he replied, "Even if it is a Brahmana, in the midst of a grand sacrifice, Yudhishthira, the righteous king, sought the counsel of Bhishma, his venerable grandsire, with a deep sense of reverence and respect for tradition. Yudhishthira asked Bhishma to elucidate the role and behavior of priests in their sacred rituals. Bhishma, with his unwavering commitment to the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, began to expound upon the qualities that made a true priest. Those who are conversant with the Chandas and Samans, he said, and can perform all the rites as prescribed in the Srutas shall be our priests. Bhishma's eyes sparkled with conviction as he emphasized the importance of loyalty, agreeable speech, and kindness towards one another. He warned against cruelty, falsehood, and usury, emphasizing that true priests should be simple, sincere, and contentus. Yudhishthira listened intently. His mind turned to the intricacies of Dakshina, the gift given to the priests as a token of appreciation for their service. The king questioned whether there was an established ordinance governing the amount of dakshina to be given or if it was left to the discretion of the sacrificer. Vishnu's response was clear. No man acquires blessedness or merit by disregarding the Vedas or by deceit or falsehood. He explained that dakshina was essential for the nourishment of the Vedas and the well-being of the priests. As the conversation unfolded, Bhishma delved into the realm of penance, a path to spiritual growth that went beyond mere physical austerity, abstention from injury, truthfulness of speech, benevolence, compassion. These are regarded as penances by the wise, he declared. Bhishma cautioned against disregarding the Vedas and violating wholesome restraints, warning that such actions would lead to self-destruction. In a moment of profound insight, Bhishma revealed the true nature of sacrifice and penance for them that perform the sacrifice of penance. He said, "The Yudhya they endeavor to effect with Brahma is their ladle, the heart is their clarified butter, and high knowledge constitutes their pavitra." As Yudhishthira listened in rapt attention, Bhishma's words illuminated the path to spiritual enlightenment, a journey that transcended mere rituals and domained this sacred conversation. Yudhishthira and Bhishma explored the depths of spirituality, seeking to understand the true essence of sacrifice, penance, and devotion. As they spoke, their words wove a tapestry of wisdom, guiding seekers on the path towards self-realization and union with the divine.
In the midst of a bustling kingdom, Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sought the counsel of his revered grandsire, Bhishma, with a keen mind and a heart full of questions. Yudhishthira asked for guidance on how to navigate the complexities of ruling a kingdom. Bhishma, with his vast experience and wisdom, began to explain the intricacies of friendship and loyalty in the context of kingship. He told Yudhishthira that a king's friends can be categorized into 4 types: those who share the same goals, those who are devoted, those related by birth, and those won over through gifts and kindness. However, Bhishma cautioned that the first 2 categories were superior to the latter 2, as they are more reliable. He warned Yudhishthira to always be cautious when dealing with friends and not to trust anyone completely. A king that is heedless is always overpowered by others. He said Bhishma emphasized the importance of having a trusted advisor who can offer wise counsel and guidance. This person should be someone who is intelligent, possessed of good memory, and skilled in the transaction of business. He or she should also be free from cruelty, wrath, and other vices. Yudhishthira listened intently to Bhishma's words, taking them as a guiding principle for his own rule. He understood that a king must always be mindful of his surroundings and not trust anyone completely. Instead, he should appoint different people to handle various tasks and keep a close eye on their actions. As the conversation continued, Bhishma spoke about the importance of family ties in maintaining harmony within the kingdom. A kinsman can never bear a kinsman's prosperity, even as a feudatory chief cannot bear to see the prosperity of his overlord. He said Yudhishthira realized that having kinsmen who are loyal and trustworthy was essential for a king's success. Bhishma concluded by advising Yudhishthira to always conduct himself with humility, modesty, and truthfulness in speech by doing, so he would be able to navigate the complexities of ruling a kingdom with wisdom and integrity, earning him everlasting fame and respect from his people. In the midst of turmoil, Yudhishthira sought guidance from Bhishma on how to navigate the treacherous waters of family relationships. His kinsmen and relatives seemed to be turning against him, and he feared that those who were supposed to be his allies would become his enemies. Bhishma replied by sharing a timeless wisdom imparted to him by Vasudeva, the great sage. Narada's conversation with Krishna. It was a tale of love, loyalty, and leadership. Vasudeva had confided in Narada about his struggles with his kinsmen who were divided between two factions. Ahuka and Akrura. Vasudeva shared that he had given away wealth to both sides, but it seemed to have only fueled the flames of conflict. He felt helpless, like a mother watching her two sons gamble against each other, wishing for victory for both. Narada listened attentively and offered his counsel. Narada explained that calamities come from within or without, and Vasudeva's troubles were self-inflicted. His generosity had created divisions among the Vrishnis, and now he was paying the price. Narada advised Vasudeva to wield a different kind of power, one that was gentle, yet piercing like a well-sharpened tool. This weapon was not made of steel, but of compassion, forgiveness, sincerity, and honor. By speaking softly and using his words to soothe the hurt feelings of his kinsmen, Vasudeva could turn away their anger and bring peace back to the family. Narada warned that this would require great courage and perseverance, for it was no easy task to bear the weight of governing such a large and complex family. As Narada finished speaking, Vasudeva looked at him with tears in his eyes, seeking guidance on how to use this gentle yet powerful tool. Narada smiled and said, "You are not just any leader, Krishna. You are the Lord of all creatures, the wisest among the Yadavas. You know the past, present, and future. Trust your instincts, rely on your wisdom, then use this weapon to heal the wounds of your family." In that moment, Vasudeva knew what he had to do. He would wield the power of compassion, forgiveness, and honor, using his words to bring peace and unity back to the Vrishnis. And with Narada's blessing, he set out on a journey to mend the divisions within his family, knowing that it would require great strength and courage, but also trusting in his own wisdom and leadership. The wise Bhishma stood before Yudhishthira and began to impart the second means to advance the interests of a king. A person who comes to you with information about the embezzlement of your treasury, he said, should be granted an audience in private and protected from the minister responsible. He explained that ministers guilty of peculation often sought to slay informants, and if left unprotected, they would surely meet their ruin. Bhishma then told a story about the sage Kalikavrichaya, who had once traveled through the kingdom of Kshimandarsan with a crow in his hand. The sage proclaimed that the crows told him about the present, past, and future, and he used this knowledge to observe the misdeeds of all the officers in the king's court. When Kalikavrichaya finally met with the king, he revealed the truth about the minister's embezzlement, saying, "My crow tells me this admit or prove the falsehood of the accusation." Quickly the officers, enraged by their own guilt, conspired against Kalikavrichaya and pierced his crow while he slept. When the sage awoke to find his bird dead, he went before the king once more and asked for protection. "I have come to you," he said, "impelled by my devotion and ready to serve you with my whole heart." The king, understanding that Kalikavrichaya was motivated by a desire to do good, granted him permission to speak freely. The sage continued ascertaining the merits and faults of your servants, as also the dangers you incur at their hands. "I have come to represent everything to you. The teachers of mankind have declared what the curses are for those who serve others." He explained that serving a king was a perilous task, fraught with danger from both friends and foes. A person serving the king cannot be guilty of heedlessness in doing the king's work. He said, "Indeed, a servant who desires to win prosperity should never display heedlessness in the discharge of his duties." Bhishma's eyes seemed to gleam as he spoke, for he had seen the truth of these words with his own eyes. He told Yudhishthira that he could not blame him for the death of his crow, but urged the king to be cautious and discerning in his relationships. "Ascertain who are your friends and who your foes," he said. "Do everything yourself without surrendering your intelligence to others." The sage's words dripped with wisdom as if drawn from a deep wellspring of experience. See, as Bhishma spoke, Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the lessons of the wise old man. He knew that serving a king was not an easy task, and that even the most well-intentioned could be deceived by those who sought.
In the midst of war-torn times, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sought guidance from his revered grandfather Bhishma on how to select trustworthy individuals. For key roles in his kingdom, the wise and aged Bhishma, aware of the importance of integrity and loyalty in governance, began to share his insights with Yudhishthira himself. For modesty, Atmavinigraha, self-restraint, sadhya, truth, and daya, sincerity. These were the essential qualities that Bhishma deemed necessary for legislators. He emphasized that individuals who possessed great courage, learning, and devotion to the king should be chosen as ministers of war during times of distress. Bhishma then described the characteristics of a courtier, someone of high descent who would always exert their powers on behalf of the king and remain loyal in both prosperity and adversity. For officers of the army, he recommended individuals born within the kingdom possessing wisdom, beauty, learning, dignity, and devotion to the king. However, Bhishma also cautioned Yudhishthira against those who would court him solely for personal gain, like a beggar seeking alms. He advised the king to appoint ministers who were of good birth and behavior, could read signs and gestures, were destitute of cruelty, and always sought the good of their master. Bhishma continued to outline the qualities of an ideal minister: one who was unchangeable in conduct, possessed learning and good behavior, observed excellent vows, was large-hearted, truthful in speech, and attentive to the king's affairs. He also warned against those who were disrespectful, wicked, or fallen away from good practices when it came to making difficult decisions. Bhishma advised Yudhishthira not to abandon the many for the sake of one individual unless that person possessed numerous accomplishments that surpassed those of others. The wise old man then listed the marks of superiority: prowess, devotion to pursuits that bring fame, and observance of wholesome restraints. Bhishma also highlighted the importance of employing a counselor who was humble, truthful in speech, forgiving in temper, had his soul under control, and possessed a sense of dignity. He emphasized that such an individual would be able to disarm even their foes and convert them into friends. As Yudhishthira listened intently to Bhishma's words, he realized the gravity of selecting trustworthy individuals for key roles in his kingdom. The wise old man cautioned him against trusting those who were not devoted to him, warning that such a minister could ruin the king like a fire consuming a tree from within. Bhishma then described the ideal qualities of a minister: intelligence unstained by pride, good disposition, energy, patience, forgiveness, purity, loyalty, firmness, and courage. He advised Yudhishthira.
In the midst of a hushed assembly, Bhishma gazed at Yudhishthira with an air of reverence. In this context, my prince, he began, his voice low and measured, I'd like to share with you an ancient tale that has guided me. For many years, as the sun's rays danced across the landscape, a conversation unfolded between Vryaspati, the wise sage, and Sakra, the mighty god. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. As Sakra inquired, O revered one, tell me, what single act can elevate a person to greatness? What can bring them acclaim among all creatures? Vryaspati's eyes sparkled like stars on a clear night as he replied, Sakra, it is the agreeableness of speech that holds the key. By practicing this virtue, one becomes an object of affection and respect among all beings. It brings happiness to those who listen, and with each gentle word, one. For 'tis bonds of love. These Vryaspati spoke his words, conjured images of a serene forest glade where birds sang in harmony with the rustling leaves. A person who speaks harshly, whose face is etched with frowns, becomes an outcast among all creatures, he cautioned. But one who greets others with smiles and kind words wins their hearts. Sakra listened intently, his expression a blend of curiosity and contemplation. He asked, even gifts given without pleasant speech bring no joy to the recipient. Vryaspati nodded. Just as rice without curry is tasteless, so too are gifts devoid of gentle words. The sweetness of one's behavior has the power to reconcile even the most bitter of disputes. The air was heavy with the weight of Vryaspati's wisdom as he continued, a king who seeks to discipline his people should do so with kind words. Sweet speech never fails in its purpose, nor does it cause pain to any heart. In a moment of profound understanding, Sakra nodded his head in acceptance. Bhishma concluded the tale, his eyes locked onto Yudhishthira's, filled with an unspoken expectation, thus guided by Vyas, but his words, Sakra, began to embody this virtue. He said, softly, I implore you, my prince, to follow in their footsteps and cultivate the art of agreeable speech. In the midst of a grand assembly, King Yudhishthira sought the counsel of Bhishma, the venerable and wise elder on the path to attaining great blessedness and eternal fame as a ruler. With humility and reverence, Yudhishthira asked Bhishma to reveal the secrets of righteous governance of Bhishma. With his eyes set low like stars in the night sky, began to speak words of wisdom. A king who rules with a cleansed soul and a commitment to protecting his subjects earns merit and fame both in this life and the next by conducting himself righteously. He paused, as if collecting his thoughts before continuing. Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued, and he asked Bhishma to elaborate on how a king should behave towards different individuals. Bhishma smiled at acknowledging Yudhishthira's intelligence, but also the rarity of finding someone with all the virtues. To be brief, he said, conduct like this is very difficult to find, even upon careful search. Bhishma then outlined the ideal composition of a king's council, comprising 4 learned Brahmanas, 8 Kshatriyas, 21 Vaisyas, 3 Sudras, and 1 Sutta. Each member should be at least 50 years old, possessing dignity, freedom from envy, and expertise in the Srutas and Smritis. The king should consult with these wise individuals who would provide counsel on matters of status. Bhishma spoke his words, wove a tapestry of righteous governance. He warned Yudhishthira against confiscating deposited goods or appropriating disputed property, lest it spoil the administration of justice and inspire sin in both the king and his kingdom. If a king governs with unrighteousness, Bhishma cautioned, fear takes possession of his heart, and the door to heaven is closed against him. Bhishma continued to share his wisdom on various aspects of kingship, emphasizing the importance of consulting with wise advisors, punishing offenders according to their crimes, cherishing good men, and never slaying an envoy under any circumstances. He also highlighted the qualities that a king's minister, aide-de-camp officer guarding the capital, and commander of forces should possess. As Bhishma concluded his discourse, Yudhishthira listened with rapt attention, his mind absorbing the weighty wisdom shared by the venerable elder. The assembly fell silent, as if holding its collective breath, awaiting the king's response to this profound counsel. In that moment, it was clear that the path to greatness lay not in power or wealth, but in righteousness and the wise exercise of authority. The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sat on his throne deep in thought. He turned to his venerable grandfather Bhishma and asked for guidance. Grandsire, Yudhishthira said, what should be the kind of city within which a king should dwell? Should he select one already made or cause one to be especially constructed? Bhishma's eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began to speak. It is proper, O Bharata, to inquire about the conduct that should be followed, and the differences that should be adopted with respect to the city in which a king should reside. He took a deep breath, launching into a detailed discourse on the subject of citadels. The 6 different kinds of citadels are water citadels, earth citadels, hill citadels, human citadels, mud citadels, and 4 citadels. Yudhishthira listened intently as Bhishma described the ideal city. The king should build his cities containing every kind of affluence and every other article of use in abundance. He said he should reside in a city that is defended by a citadel which contains an abundant stock of rice and weapons, protected with impenetrable walls and the trenches. Bhishma spoke. Yudhishthira's eyes grew wider with understanding. He envisioned the bustling streets, teeming with elephants and steeds, cars and men possessed of learning and versed in the mechanical arts. The city was a place of beauty and music, where Vedic hymns echoed through the air. Bhishma continued to guide Yudhishthira, outlining the king's duties and responsibilities. He should check all abuses and evils in both his cities and provinces. He said he should be employed in collecting provisions of every kind and filling his arsenals with care. A wise old sage also emphasized the importance of honoring the righteous and chastising the unrighteous. The king should honor the ascetics and make unto them gifts at proper seasons. He said as Bhishma finished speaking, Yudhishthira rose from his throne, a look of determination on his face. He knew that building such a city would require great effort and dedication, but he was ready to take on the challenge. Bhishma smiled, pleased with the young king's enthusiasm. I have now told thee in brief the indications of the city in which the king should reside, he said, and with that Yudhishthira set out to build a city that would be a shining example of justice and prosperity, a place where his people could thrive under his wise and just rule. In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the eldest hand of a brother, sought the counsel of Bhishma, the wise and venerable grandfather figure of the Bharata dynasty, with humility and reverence. Yudhishthira asked Bhishma to share his wisdom on how a kingdom could be consolidated and protected. Bhishma's eyes sparkled with knowledge as he began to explain the intricate system of governance that had been established by the ancient sages. A headman should be appointed for each village, he said, in over 10 villages. There should be a superintendent. This chain of command continued with officers overseeing 20 villages, then 100, and finally 1,000. As Bhishma spoke, his words painted vivid images in Yudhishthira's mind. He envisioned the headman carefully observing the villagers, noting their strengths and weaknesses, and reporting back to the superintendent above him. The system was designed to be efficient and fair, with each officer responsible for a specific number of villages. But Bhishma did not stop there. He went on to describe the importance of taxation, explaining that the king should levy taxes in such a way that both he and his people would benefit from them. The king should always avoid acts that may lead to hatred among his people. He cautioned a king who becomes an object of hatred can never acquire what is for his good. Yudhishthira listened intently, drinking in Bhishma's words. Like a parched traveler at an oasis, he saw the wisdom in Bhishma's counsel and knew that it was essential to learn from him. Bhishma continued, the king should milk his kingdom like a calf, sucking its mother's milk. If the cow is milked too much, the calf becomes weak and cannot do much service to its owner. Yudhishthira nodded in understanding, seeing the analogy between the kingdom and a living being that required care and nurturing. As Bhishma finished speaking, Yudhishthira felt a sense of awe and gratitude. He knew that he had been given a precious gift, the wisdom of governance, from one who had lived through many ages with a newfound appreciation for the complexities of ruling a kingdom. Yudhishthira turned to his brothers and began to discuss how they could apply Bhishma's teachings in their own lives. In the days that followed, Yudhishthira and his brothers worked tirelessly to implement the system of governance that Bhishma had described. They appointed headmen for each village, established a network of superintendents and officers, and began to collect taxes in a fair and just manner. As they worked, Yudhishthira felt a sense of pride and purpose. He knew that he was not only building a kingdom, but also creating a community where people could live in peace and prosperity. And in the midst of a royal inquiry, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, posed a question to his revered grandsire, Bhishma. Grandsire, he asked, what should a king do if, despite his vast wealth and power, he still yearns for more? The elder statesman Bhishma gazed at Yudhishthira with wise eyes and began to impart the timeless wisdom of governance. See, king who seeks to earn spiritual merit must focus on the welfare of his subjects. Bhishma declared he should protect them according to their needs, time and place, using his intelligence and power to make informed decisions. Like a diligent bee gathering nectar from flowers, the king should carefully extract the resources needed for his kingdom's growth without exhausting its potential. Bhishma continued, a wise ruler should draw from his subjects like a cowherd milks a cow, gently without causing harm or neglecting the calf. He must be as a leech drawing blood doing. So with caution and restraint, the king should also conduct himself towards his people like a tigress carrying her cubs, gentle, yet firm, touching them with care, but never piercing their hearts. As Bhishma spoke, he wove an intricate tapestry of metaphors to illustrate the delicate balance between governance and compassion. A king should be like a mouse that cuts the feet of sleeping animals without causing them harm. He said he should gradually increase his demands on his subjects, like a person training a young bullock until they become accustomed to carrying their share. Bhishma warned Yudhishthira against imposing excessive taxes or fines unseasonably, for this would only lead to resentment and rebellion among the people. Instead, he recommended that the king should conciliate those who are prominent among his subjects and through them gradually bring the common folk under control. The wise elder cautioned that mere entreaties were not enough. A ruler must employ measured and gentle means to achieve his goals. He advised Yudhishthira to check the influence of disorderly elements within society, drinking establishments, public women, gamblers, and pimps, for they sowed seeds of chaos in the kingdom. Bhishma
also emphasized the importance of restraining subjects from sinful behavior, as their ruler shared both their merits and demerits. He warned that a king who failed to do so would incur a fourth part of his people's sins, just as he would earn a fourth part of their merits. As Bhishma concluded his counsel, Yudhishthira listened intently, absorbing the wisdom of his grandsire like a parched land drinks in the rains. The young king realized that true leadership was not about accumulating wealth or power, but about serving his people with compassion and justice.
The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Bhishma, the wise and venerable advisory king, Yudhishthira, sat in contemplative silence, his eyes lost in thought. Suddenly he spoke up, his voice low and measured. "Let us not forget, my king," Bhishma said, "the sacred ordinances of our land, the trees that bear fruit, for the people's sustenance, must be protected at all costs. It is the duty of the Brahmanas to tend to these sacred groves, and those who care for them are entitled to a share of the bounty." Yudhishthira listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. "But what if a Brahmana, dear Bhishma," he asked, "is forced to leave our kingdom due to lack of support? What should we do?" Bhishma's eye sparkled with wisdom as he replied, "If such a Brahmana desires to abandon the kingdom for want of sustenance, we must provide him with means to live. We must ensure that his needs are met, and that he is not driven away by neglect or indifference." A king nodded, thoughtfully taking in Bhishma's words. "But what if the Brahmana refused to stay?" "What then?" Bhishma smiled knowingly. "If he still insists on leaving," he said, "we must consult with the other Brahmanas and ask for their guidance. We must seek their counsel, that we may know how best to govern our kingdom and protect its people." Yudhishthira's eyes widened in understanding as Bhishma continued, "The king who protects his subjects, who seeks to understand their needs and desires, is the greatest of rulers. He must be mindful of the welfare of all, from the Brahmanas to the lowest of his subjects. He must protect those who are weak and vanquish those who would do harm." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Bhishma paused, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "But how does one acquire superiority over others?" he asked. Yudhishthira, king's face lit up with curiosity as he leaned forward, eager for the answer. Bhishma smiled again, his voice taking on a sweet tone. "My young friend," he said, "the strong prey upon the weak, just as animals devour their prey in the wild. The king must be ever vigilant, always mindful of those who would do him harm, and those whom he must protect." As the night wore on, Bhishma's words wove a tapestry of wisdom around Yudhishthira, teaching him the secrets of governance and the delicate balance between power and compassion. And as the king listened, his heart grew lighter, filled with a newfound sense of purpose. In the ancient times, Bhishma, a revered sage and warrior, sat in silence before Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers. His eyes seemed to hold 1,000 tales within them. As he began to speak, Bhishma said, "I shall recount to you, O Yudhishthira, a conversation that once took place between Yudhishthira, a sage of great wisdom and learning, and Mandatra, the king of the land. It was a tale of righteousness, of duty, and of the importance of a king's role in upholding justice." Yudhishthira's words echoed in Bhishma's mind as he began to narrate. Yudhishthira said, "A king is not born for personal gain or pleasure, but to serve the greater good. He is the protector of the world and must act with righteousness at all times, for when a king acts justly, he attains the status of a god. Conversely, if he acts unrighteously, he sinks into the depths of hell." As Bhishma spoke, his voice wove a tapestry of words that painted vivid pictures in Yudhishthira's mind. He described how righteousness was the foundation upon which all creatures rested, and how it relied on the king to uphold its principles. "A king who upholds righteousness is truly a king," Yudhishthira had said. "He must be guided by his conscience and not swayed by personal desires or whims. For when sinfulness prevails, righteous behavior comes to an end, and unrighteousness increases greatly." Bhishma's eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire as he continued the tale. When a king fails to restrain vice, a confusion of castes follows, and sinful beings begin to take birth in respectable families. The king must be vigilant and act righteously for the benefit of his subjects, for if he acts heedlessly, a great evil becomes the consequence. As Bhishma finished speaking, Yudhishthira sat in contemplative silence, his mind absorbing the weight of Yudhishthira's words. He knew that the tale was not just a historical account, but a reminder of the high standards expected of those who held power in the stillness that followed Bhishma's eyes seemed to hold a deep wisdom as if they were gazing into the very soul of Yudhishthira. The air was heavy with the weight of responsibility, and it was clear that the tale had left an indelible mark on the young king's heart as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the assembly. Bhishma rose from his seat. His words hung in the air like a gentle breeze, whispering secrets to those who would listen. Thus spoke Yudhishthira, O Yudhishthira, may these words guide you on your path as you navigate. In the midst of a lush forest where the gentle rustle of leaves whispered secrets to the wind, Yudhishthira sat in contemplative silence, his eyes lost in thought as he pondered the intricacies of life. He spoke words that would echo through eternity. When the deity of clouds pours forth its bounty, and the king rules with virtue, he began the land flourishes, and its people bask in felicity. As he spoke, a washerman appeared before him, his hand stained with the remnants of his craft. Yudhishthira gazed at him with discerning eyes, saying that washerman who cannot cleanse a garment without stripping it of its collar is unskilled in his art. He paused, his gaze drifting to the other orders of society, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaisyas, before continuing, just as that washerman is a failure, so too is one who abandons their duties and becomes a civil. The air grew thick with anticipation as Yudhishthira's words wove a tapestry of truth. He spoke of the king's role in shaping the ages, Kreta, Dwapara, and Kali, and how it was the monarch who determined which hero would prevail. The four orders of society, the Vedas, and the duties associated with each mode of life all relied on the king's conduct. As Yudhishthira's narrative unfolded, he painted a vivid picture of the consequences that befell a kingdom when its ruler became heedless. The three kinds of fire, the three Vedas, and sacrifices with date China all fade away. He said, his voice heavy with warning. The land itself would suffer as elephants, steeds, kind camels, mules, asses, and other animals lost their vitality. Yudhishthira's words were a call to action, a reminder of the king's sacred duty to protect the weak and the fold. Righteousness, the Creator created power for the protection of weakness. He declared, emphasizing the delicate balance between these two forces. All creatures looked up to the king as their creator and destroyer, and it was his responsibility to ensure that they lived in harmony. As Yudhishthira's discourse came to a close, Mandakari, the monarch, listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of his duties. The storyteller's words had awakened within him a sense of purpose, reminding him that he was not only a ruler, but also a guardian of his people and a champion of righteousness. And the stillness that followed Yudhishthira's final words hung in the air like a benediction. The king is himself, the God incarnate unto all that are righteous. By subduing his senses, he succeeds in acquiring great affluence by not subduing them. He incurs sin as man that try not it in understanding the.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the righteous king, turned to Bhishma, the venerable grandsire, and asked for guidance on how to conduct himself as a just ruler. How shall I behave, O grandsire? He inquired, seeking wisdom from one who had lived a life of unparalleled virtue. Bhishma's eyes twinkled with age-old knowledge as he began to recount the tale of King Vasumana, a monarch renowned for his wisdom and integrity in a bygone era. Vasumana had sought out Vamadeva, a sage of great ascetic merit, to impart the secrets of righteous governance. Vamadeva, seated with an air of serenity, like Yayati, son of Naasha, spoke in measured tones, My king, do thou act with righteousness, for there is nothing superior to it. Those kings who adhere to righteousness shall conquer the entire earth. His words dripped with conviction as he painted a vivid picture of a just ruler, king who regards righteousness as his guiding principle. Vamadeva continued and acts in accordance with the counsel of the righteous shines forth like a beacon of light, but one who disregards righteousness and seeks to rule through brute force shall soon fall from grace, losing both virtue and prosperity. As Vamadeva's words flowed like a river, he cautioned against the dangers of a ruler governed by caprice or one who indulged in empty boasts. Such a king, he warned, shall meet with destruction, even if he rules over the entire earth. Conversely, a king who was desirous of prosperity, free from malice, and gifted with intelligence will thrive like the Essene, swelling with the waters of 100 streams. Vamedava's counsel emphasized the importance of humility. A king must never consider himself to have sufficient virtue, enjoyments, wealth, intelligence, or friends. He said, upon these depends the conduct of the world. By listening to his words, a king would gain fame, achievements, prosperity, and loyal subjects. The sage's wisdom continued to unfold like a lotus flower. A devoted king who seeks virtue and wealth through righteous means shall obtain great prosperity. But one who is illiberal without affection, and afflicts his subjects with undue chastisements, shall soon meet with destruction. Ishmael concluded the tale by emphasizing the importance of guidance from wise preceptors and the value of self-reflection in all endeavors. A king who listens to the instructions of his teachers, supervises his kingdom himself, and is guided by virtue in all his acquisitions shall enjoy happiness. For a long time, as Yudhishthira listened intently, Bhishma's words seemed to echo through the ages, imparting timeless wisdom on the conduct of a righteous king.
In the kingdom of Vedic India, King Vamadeva stood before his people and began to impart ancient wisdom on the art of kingship. He cautioned that when a powerful ruler acts unjustly towards the weak, those who follow in their footsteps will imitate such behavior, ultimately leading to the downfall of the kingdom. As he spoke, Vamadeva emphasized the importance of a king's conduct, serving as a model for his people. If you are observant of your duties, he said, men in general will accept your conduct as a guide. Conversely, if a king fails to uphold their responsibilities, even their own kinfolk will reject them. The king explained that a kshatriya who deviates from the traditional code of conduct is considered to have abandoned their sacred duties. He highlighted the dangers of a ruler who seizes power through conquest, but fails to honor his vanquished foes, instead succumbing to malice and greed. Vamadeva also stressed the importance of displaying power wisely, living cheerfully, and taking action in times of danger. A king who does so becomes beloved by all creatures and is never far from prosperity. He cautioned against doing disservice to others, as it will ultimately lead to reciprocal harm. The wise king continued, if thou dost disservice to any person, thou shouldst, when the turn comes, do him service by showing kindness and generosity. One can win over even their enemies. Vamadeva also advised against being overly joyful or sorrowful, as this can lead to imbalance and poor decision-making. In his next breath, he emphasized the importance of appointing wise and loyal servants to key positions within the kingdom. That person who by the possession of such qualifications pleases the king and who is never heedless in taking care of the interests of his master should be appointed by the king in the affairs of his kingdom. As Vamadeva spoke on, he delved into the intricacies of governance, advising that a king should always watch over their own well-being as well as that of their subjects, from ministers that have once been chastised, from women in especial, from mountains and inaccessible regions, from elephants and horses and reptiles. The king should always with heedfulness protect his own self. The wise words of Vamadeva echoed through the kingdom, guiding future generations on the path to successful leadership. His counsel was clear. A king must uphold righteousness, protect their subjects, and govern wisely in order to maintain prosperity and greatness. In the end, King Vamadeva's teachings serve as a testament to the enduring principles of kingly conduct. His words would be remembered for centuries to come, shaping the destiny of those who sought to rule with wisdom and compassion. In the midst of a grand assembly, the wise sage Vamadeva stood before King Vashmana, his words dripping with wisdom like honey nectar. O monarch, he began, his voice carrying across the hall, the king should win victories without battles, for it is not the blood-soaked spoils of war that bring glory, but rather the wise and gentle hand of leadership. Vamadeva's eyes twinkled with ancient knowledge as he continued, a king's power is confirmed when his dominions are vast and prosperous, his subjects loyal and contented, and his officers numerous and skilled. When a king's soldiery are well paid and full of vigor, even a small force can conquer the entire world. The assembly hummed on Vamadeva's every word, their faces aglow with wonder. The sage paused, surveying the room as if searching for a truth that only he could see a king whose subjects have compassion for all creatures, and who possesses great wealth and grain, has truly confirmed his power when a king believes himself stronger than his foes. Then, and only then, should he seek to expand his territories, and wealth. Vamedava's words hung in the air, like a challenge, as if daring any among them to disagree. But it was not just the acquisition of power that Vamedava spoke of. He cautioned against deceit and procrastination, warning that a king who cheats his own people or delays in fulfilling his duties will ultimately cut down his own self like an axe biting into a forest. A king who knows how to slay his own temper, he said with a gentle smile, will find no enemies outside his gates. As Vamedava finished speaking, the assembly erupted into a symphony of nods and murmurs of agreement. King Bhishma's face shone with gratitude, and he bowed deeply before the sage. Bhishma, who had been listening intently to the exchange, stepped forward to offer his own words of encouragement. Thus addressed by Vamedava, he said to Arjuna, "King Bhishma, follow these wise counsels, and I have no doubt that you too will succeed in conquering both the worlds, not through force or violence, but through wisdom and compassion." The assembly fell silent once more, each member lost in their own thoughts. As they pondered Vamedava's words in this quiet moment, it seemed as though the very fabric of reality was being woven anew, with every thread infused with the gentle yet unyielding power of leadership. The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered before Yudhishthira, the wise and just king. He stood tall, his eyes fixed on Bhishma, the venerable grandsire who had fought in countless battles with a deep sense of respect. Yudhishthira asked for guidance on how to conduct himself in battle against another Kshatriya. King Bhishma's eyes twinkled with wisdom as he began to speak. "My dear grandson," he said, "when a Kshatriya desires to subjugate another, he must first announce his intentions to the people of the land. He should declare himself their king and offer them protection in exchange for tribute, or challenge them to battle." Bhishma's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and reassuring. Yudhishthira nodded, thoughtfully eager to learn more. "Tell me, O grandsire," he asked, "how should the Kshatriya king conduct himself in battle?" Bhishma's expression turned grave, his voice taking on a serious tone. "A Kshatriya must not attack an opponent who is unarmed or defenseless. He should fight fairly and abandon his opponent when they are disabled." As Bhishma spoke, he painted a vivid picture of the battlefield. If the enemy comes clad in mail, the Kshatriya should also wear armor. If the enemy advances with an army, the Kshatriya must meet him with equal force. Deceit and trickery have no place on the battlefield. Instead, the righteous warrior should resist with fair means. Yudhishthira listened intently, his eyes wide with understanding. Bhishma continued to guide him through the intricacies of battle, emphasizing the importance of righteousness and fairness. "A Kar warrior must fight against a Kar warrior," he said, "and one who has fallen into distress should not be struck, nor should one who is wounded or weakened in any way." Vishma's words were like a river flowing smoothly to its destination, carrying Yudhishthira along with it. He spoke of the importance of using only righteous means to achieve victory, and of sparing the lives of those who have fallen into distress. A weak or wounded man should not be slain, he said, nor one whose weapon has been broken, or whose bowstring has been cut. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a soft twilight glow. Bhishma concluded his teachings. Manu himself has said that battles should be fought fairly and with righteousness. The righteous warrior should always act righteously towards those who are righteous. His words hung in the air like a promise, a reminder of the importance of living a virtuous life. Yudhishthira looked at Bhishma with gratitude and respect, his eyes shining with. In the midst of a grand assembly, Bhishma, the venerable patriarch, stood tall and began to impart wisdom on the art of kingship. His words were like a gentle stream flowing effortlessly into the minds of his listeners. Kings should never covet power through unrighteous means. He declared, his voice firm but gentle, even if it leads to dominion over the entire earth. What joy can be derived from such a hollow victory? Or, my dear Kaurava prince, he turned to Yudhishthira, a triumph stained by deceit is ephemeral and cannot lead one to heavenly realms. Bhishma paused, surveying the assembly with his piercing gaze. A warrior whose armor has fallen, or who begs for quarter, should be captured, not slain. If a vanquished king falls into your hands, do not engage him in combat yourself. Instead, bring him to your palace and persuade him to acknowledge you as his lord for an entire year, whether he accepts or refuses. The defeated foe will gain a new lease on life by living among you, as Bhishma spoke his words, wove but tapestry of compassion and justice. If a king seizes a maiden from her vanquished enemy's household, he should keep her for a year and ask if she would choose to marry him or another suitor. If she declines, she must be returned to her family. Similarly, the victor should behave with kindness towards all other spoils of war. The patriarch's voice took on a stern tone as he continued, a king should never appropriate wealth taken from thieves, and those awaiting execution. The kind seized by force should be given to Brahmanas, so they may drink their milk. The bulls, too, should either be set to agricultural work or returned to their rightful owners. Bhishma's words echoed with the wisdom of ages as he spoke about the sacred duty of kings. A king must fight only against another king. A non-king should never raise his hand against a monarch. If a Brahmana seeking peace intercedes between two warring armies, both parties must immediately cease hostilities. The assembly listened with rapt attention as Bhishma warned against the transgression of righteous codes. A Kshatriya who breaks this rule will become a wretch of his order and should be shunned by society. A king desiring victory should never conduct himself thus, for what gain can be greater than righteousness? As Bhishma concluded his discourse, he turned to Yudhishthira. Once more, the excitable classes in a newly conquered kingdom must be conciliated with soothing words and gifts. This is the wise policy of a king who seeks true victory. If instead you govern them with harshness, they will abandon your kingdom and side with your foes, waiting for calamities to strike. Bhishma's eyes seemed the sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered before Yudhishthira. The young king's question hung in the air. Seeking the wisdom of the venerable, Bhishma learned one. Yudhishthira asked, by what acts do kings win regions of felicity? For I have seen that in marching or in battle, a king slays large multitudes. By what means can they be purified and cleansed? Bhishma's eyes sparkled with ancient knowledge. As he began to speak, a king becomes pure and cleansed by chastising the wicked, by attaching and cherishing the good, and by performing sacrifices and gifts. It is true that kings desiring victory afflict many creatures, but after victory they advance and aggrandize all. Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued as Bhishma continued to explain. Just as a reclaimer of a field takes up both paddy blades and weeds, so too does the king who wields weapons destroy many that deserve destruction. Yet this extensive destruction causes the growth and advancement of those that remain. Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture in Yudhishthira's mind. He who protects people from plunder, slaughter, and affliction comes to be regarded as the giver of wealth, of life, and of food. The king, therefore, by thus adoring the deities, by means of a union of all sacrifices whose date shine not, is the dispelling of every body's fear and joys. Every kind of felicity here and attains to a residence in Indra's heaven hereafter. The assembly listened intently as Bhishma spoke of the king who fights, or Brahmanas, and lays down his life. That king comes to be regarded as the embodiment of a sacrifice with illimitable presence. If a king with his quivers full of shafts shoots them fearlessly at his foes, the very gods do not see anyone on earth that is superior to him. Yudhishthira's eyes were wide with wonder as Bhishma described the rewards of such bravery. In such a case, equal to the number of shafts with which he pierces the bodies of his enemies is the number of regions that he enjoys, eternal and capable of granting every wish. But Bhishma's words also carry a warning. The blood that flows from his body cleanses him of all his sins, along with the very pain that he feels on the occasion. Persons conversant with the scriptures say that the pains a Kshatriya suffers in battle operate his penances for enhancing his meritus. The sun dipped below the horizon. Bhishma's words painted a stark contrast between the hero who rushes to battle and the court who deserts his comrades. He who desires to save his own life breaths by deserting. In the midst of war-torn lands and the din of battle, Yudhishthira, the wise and righteous king, sought the counsel of his revered grandsire, Bhishma. As they sat in contemplative silence, Yudhishthira posed a profound question to Bhishma. Tell me, O grandsire, what regions are earned by unreturning heroes who encounter death in battle? Bhishma's eyes sparkled with ancient wisdom as he began to recount
the tale of Amvarisha, a mighty king who had once ruled over the land. Amvarisha's general Sudeva was said to have been reborn into a celestial realm where he was accompanied by Indra himself in trade. Amvarisha approached Vasava, Indra, and inquired about his general's ascension. Vasava, I have governed the earth with righteousness, practiced all duties as declared by the scriptures, and studied the Vedas with dedication. Amvarisha said, I have honored my preceptors' guests and the gods with offerings. My general Sudeva was a warrior of tranquil soul. Why has he transcended Mingra? Smelled knowingly his voice like thunder on a summer day in battle. Every warrior becomes a performer of the sacrifice of battle. The elephants are the Ritwajas priests of this sacrifice, while steeds are its auterious offering bearers. The flesh and blood of foes constitute the libations, and vultures and ravens drink from the Mindra. Continued to explain that in this sacrifice the warriors themselves become the sacred objects. The strokes inflicted with lances and swords become the ladles of the sacrificer. The arrows are its large double-mouthed ladles. The blood that runs over the field is the final libation fraught with great meritus. Indra spoke. A vision unfolded before Yudhishthira's eyes. He saw the warriors, each one a performer in this grand sacrifice of battle. The warrior who casts off his body for protecting his master earns regions of felicity. Like mine, Indra, declared Yudhishthira. Listened intently as Bhishma continued to narrate the tale. He who strews the altar with swords and severe arms succeeds in winning regions of felicity. Like mine, the wise king saw that the warriors were not merely fighting for victory, but performing a sacred rite, one that would grant them realms of bliss. As the narrative came full circle, Yudhishthira realized that true valor lay not in escaping death, but in embracing it with courage and honor. The warrior who regards the van of the hostile army as his wife succeeds in winning all regions of felicity. Indra said, his voice echoing through eternity, in this sacred tale. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Mithala, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. King Janak, a wise and just ruler, stood before his troops, his eyes shining with the fierce light. He had called them together for one final speech before the great battle that lay ahead. Me, dear warriors, he began, his voice ringing out across the assembly. I want to show you something. Behold, with a sweep of his arm, Janak led his men to the edge of the city, where two visions awaited them. On one side, a radiant landscape stretched out before them. Lush green forests, shimmering rivers, and sparkling cities that seemed to be made of gold. This was the realm of heaven, where heroes who fought fearlessly would find their reward. But on the other side, a dark and foreboding landscape loomed, a desolate, wasteland, devoid of beauty or joy, stretched out before them like an endless grave. This was the realm of hell, where cowards who fled from battle would spend eternity in darkness and despair. Janaka's eyes burned with intensity as he spoke. Choose your path, my friends, he urged his warriors. Will you be heroes fighting for glory and honor, or will you flee like cowards, condemning yourselves to a life of shame and misery? The troops were silent for a moment, weighing their options, but then with a mighty roar, they shouted out their resolve. They would fight fearlessly and conquered their foes in battle. Janaka smelled his heart, swelling with pride. Well done, my warriors, he exclaimed. Now let us form our array for battle. Our car warriors will lead the charge, followed by our horsemen and foot soldiers. This is the way to victory. We must be strong, united, and fearless. As Janak spoke, his men formed up behind him, their armor glinting in the fading light of day. They were a formidable force, ready to face whatever lay ahead. But as they prepared for battle, Janaka's thoughts turned to the wise words of Bhishma, who had once said that heroes are the foundation upon which the world rests. A hero protects and cherishes all he had declared, and all things depend upon the hero. Janaka knew this to be true. He had seen it in his own life as a king who had fought for justice and righteousness, and now as he led his men into battle, he was filled with a sense of purpose and duty. We will emerge victorious, he told his warriors, and our names will be remembered for generations to come. We are heroes, and we will fight like heroes. With that, the army of Mithala charged forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura as Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava prince, sought the counsel of his revered grandsire Bhishma.
Tell me, O Bhishma, Yudhishthira asked, how should kings desirous of victory lead their troops to battle, even if it means offending slightly against the rules of righteousness? Bhishma, the wise and venerable warrior, nodded his head in consideration. Some say that righteousness is made stable by truth, while others believe it is achieved through reasoning or good behavior. He began, but I shall tell you what the scriptures reveal as the means for success in all endeavor. She paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. A king must possess both wisdom and cunning. Though he may know of deceitful tactics, he should only employ them to counteract the dangers that threaten him. Enemies often seek to weaken a kingdom by so